Hey everyone, Gill Gross here, post-match, Taylor Fritz versus Frances Tiafoe, US Open 2024 semifinal. If you're not here for spoilers, click off the video. Taylor Fritz makes his first career major final. He had never been past the quarterfinals before this US Open, and he wins this All-American showdown, becoming the first American man to make a major final since Andy Roddick in 2009, and he will play Jannik Sinner in that final. Let me start with the American angle on this because that felt like a pretty big deal. I know some of you don't care, but for American tennis fans, we've seen this group come up together. Tommy, Riley Opelka, Frances Tiafoe, Taylor Fritz, really those four. And then, there's a younger generation now with like Sebastian Korda and Ben Shelton and Brandon Nakashima. But those four, they were all kind of a promising group coming up at a time that Americans were kind of starved for a top contender, despite the substantial success that John Isner had and Marty Fish for a couple of years, right? Taylor Fritz was the one out ahead of that group. He was the first guy to rise up the rankings. And when he did, anyone who knows anything about tennis development and juniors and, tennis psychology knows how important that is. Because when Taylor broke into the top 40 and the top 30 and the top 20, Frances said, okay, why not me? I know I'm on his level. I've been playing with this guy since he was 14. I know I'm right there. Tommy Paul had no professionalism. It's well documented. He wasn't working hard. He wasn't taking care of his gifts or taking advantage of his gifts. And he sees Taylor Fritz in the top 20 and he says, what am I doing? What am I doing? I can do that. So Taylor Fritz, and they'd all admit this, he was the guy pushing them. They benefited from chasing him. But then it got a little bit more complicated. First of all, they all did a lot of really great hard work to catch up with him to a certain extent. And maybe they never fully caught him, but Tommy Paul got his big run into the Australian Open semis. Frances, 2 years ago, made it to the US Open semifinal. Has had a couple of really rewarding runs in New York. Ben Shelton makes the US Open semifinal last year. And suddenly Taylor, despite all of his successes in the Indian Wells title and being the top-ranked American, 3 years in a row, he's looking at it, and he's never said this, but I'm sure he was looking at it like, man, I'm the one guy who hasn't had that run at a slam? Really? I'm sure that was a little bit frustrating at the very least. Well, lo and behold, I think a little bit of poetic justice here that he is the first to break through and make a major final, the first since Roddick at Wimbledon in 2009. I think there's a little poetic justice in that. I think it is so well deserved for Taylor. I have been saying for a long time, maybe I should be saving some of this for after the final, to be quite frank, but I've been saying for a long time that Taylor Fritz is one of the absolute talent maximizers in this game. And for now, I'll leave it there, and maybe I'll expand on that a little bit later, maybe on Sunday. Let's see. All right. As far as this match is concerned, I did think Taylor Fritz was going to win, but the way it happened completely took me by surprise. I thought Fritz was going to have a big advantage in the ball striking, and that Tiafoe was going to need to outserve him, that Frances was going to need to come forward, that he was going to need to kind of, break up the rallies with, a lot, maybe some drop shotting. He was going to have to net rush as much as possible and kind of run away from the baseline in order to win this match. That is not what happened at all. Frances was impeccable off the ground for the vast majority of this match. He was playing with unbelievable intention and was really demanding the utmost quality for Taylor, and anytime that quality dropped off whatsoever, he was taking the ball early and changing direction down the line. The way he was doing it off the backhand was probably even more impressive, and oftentimes that can be even more dangerous against a righty, because when Taylor hits a cross-court backhand out of his backhand corner, and this is typical, I talked a little bit about this pattern with Yannick. When you hit a good cross-court backhand, you normally, as a right-hander, you don't recover all the way to the middle. You kind of stay in that backhand corner, and you're thinking, can I get a forehand on the next ball? And the way Frances was like cutting off that cross-court backhand and redirecting it down the line so hard, so low, so flat, and the way he moves to his backhand, he has an an incredible ability to take time away, because he almost runs through the backhand on that diagonal. And Taylor was having a ton of trouble covering Frances Tiafoe's backhand down the line. That's the net. And then on the forehand side, similar. Thought Tiafoe got way more zip than he usually gets off of his cross-court forehand. I thought Tiafoe was going to have trouble trading forehands with Fritz, who is usually a bigger hitter off the forehand and a more consistent hitter when he tries to ramp up the pace on the forehand. But Tiafoe, man, great cross-court forehands. Also some good redirections off of that wing. So I think it caught Taylor by surprise, to be completely honest. And Fritz did manage to win the second set. He had a great serving set in the second. That was very, very crucial. Trying to pull up my stat page here. Set by set. Tiafoe in the second set only made 56% of his returns in play. And essentially, Fritz was holding easily the entire time. And then Tiafoe threw in a bit of a loose service game at 4-5 in that set. So Fritz took the second, and then it was right back on the horse for Tiafoe. Played some good points in the opening game of the third to break serve and held the rest of the way. 2-1, Frances is up. And this is where I think Taylor sort of changed. And he dug in. And I think the biggest change at this point was that Fritz started to really commit to his defense. He did so much great running in the third set. Sometimes defense is an attitude in tennis, really. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but sometimes it's about how hard are you running into corners? How determined are you to make extra balls? Obviously, how well are you reading the game? And I think Fritz started to read the attacks by Tiafoe quite a bit better. And, he was maybe even willing to drop back a little further. He was ready for the pace. He was ready for the aggression off of the ground. But the way Fritz was running into corners and playing, cross-court neutralizations, it just went up a couple notches. And as a result, they got into some physical rallies. Maybe Frances could have done a better job of moving forward at times in this fourth set. And then Tiafoe's legs started to go. They started to go pretty early in terms of the match clock. I mean, yes, it was a fourth set, but they were playing quite a few short points, especially the second set was like a breeze for the servers. And it was a little bit early for Frances to get tired. But again, when the nerves are ramped up to the maximum on such a big occasion, that factors in. And Tiafoe has never had a good gas tank. That has always been a problem for Frances. I think he's 6-12 now in fifth sets. And then the first serve percentage, that's the other thing. That went down. I was really surprised by how well Frances served through 2 sets. 63% in the first, 73% in the second. That is not always the case for Tiafoe. Like, let me check his season average here. He averages 58%. So he was above that for the first 2 sets by quite a bit. And then the next 3 sets, he ended up below it. 44% in the third set, which he did manage to win. And then 39% in the fourth, 44% in the fifth. The second serve is a little bit of a weakness for Frances. I mean, in the speed category, you can kind of see that sometimes it's a little slow and a little attackable. And for the match, Tiafoe's second serve average ended up being, 90 miles per hour. So compare that to Fritz, 99 miles per hour. That's a huge difference. And Taylor is really good. Most great ball strikers are. But Taylor is threatening off of both wings. And when you let him take a cut at a second serve, he's really good at ripping the ball on the second return. So certainly we saw a lot of that down the stretch from Fritz. And I think once he started to see Frances make some errors and slow down, he smelled blood in the water. He started to free up off the ground, and the ball started coming off cleaner off of his racket. Because another thing, Taylor doesn't shank that many forehands as he was early in the match. And I think, maybe it was his first night match on Ash. Did that play in? Or was he just kind of taken a little bit by surprise by the way Tiafoe was striking the ball? I think maybe a little bit of both. But he settled in. The rallies got physical. Tiafoe kind of lost his legs, especially when Fritz was starting to really dig in. And I kind of want to end on the fact that the way Taylor was running and extending points with his legs, he didn't always have that. And athletically, he's really had to try to get every inch that he can get out of his body, because he's never been like naturally gifted with great speed. I think he's had to work extremely hard on it, but the legs just stayed way more solid than his opponent here. I think that was the biggest factor. All right, I'm going to leave it at that. I'll have the final preview tomorrow morning. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.